quantum computing urgency, renting LLMs for offensive attacks, and using AI to audit. Welcome to Priviso Live, South Africa's weekly vodcast on information security, ICT legislation, and artificial intelligence. I'm Lynn and
I'm Stephen
and I'm Kayla. And if you're a regular listener, welcome back. If you're joining us for the first time, you're in for a treat.
Today we're covering 3 stories that all landed in our laps more or less simultaneously this week, which tells you something about just how fast this space is moving.
And they're not entirely unrelated, which we'll get to as we go.
Our first story comes from Dark Reading, and it dropped on the 26th of June. The headline is, "Meeting Trump's 2030 quantum deadline will be expensive, complex." And honestly, that is a masterwork of understatement.
So here's the background. U.S. President Donald Trump signed 2 executive orders on the 22nd of June, this past weekend. The first is titled, "Ushering in the Next Frontier of Quantum Innovation." It's about building America's quantum technology ecosystem, investing in workforce, partnering with allies in the private sector, and essentially staking a claim at the front of the global quantum computing race.
The second one is what made the security community collectively put down their coffee. And yes, Stephen, even the good coffee. It's called Securing the Nation Against Advanced Cryptographic Attacks, and it sets out what the US government needs to do to protect its infrastructure from quantum-enabled attackers.
Now, a quick explanation for anyone who's newer to this space. The encryption algorithms we rely on today, RSA, elliptic curve cryptography, these are the mathematical locks that protect everything from online banking to confidential government communications. They work because our current computers can't crack them in any reasonable time frame. It would take classical computers thousands of years to break a well-implemented RSA key.
But a quantum computer, which exploits the principles of quantum mechanics to perform certain calculations exponentially faster than classical machines, changes that equation entirely. A sufficiently powerful quantum computer could break those same encryption keys in hours, or potentially minutes. This transition to quantum-resistant encryption is called Post-Quantum Cryptography, or PQC for short. If you need more detail, catch our earlier episodes 13, 14, and 15, which provides the context.
And the executive order doesn't just talk about this in vague future terms, it gives hard deadlines. Federal agencies must appoint a PQC migration lead within 30 days of the order. They must complete the transition to PQC for key establishment and data encryption by the end of 2030. And for digital signatures on high-value, high-impact systems, the deadline is end of 2031. Federal contractors are also bound by these NIST standards, NIST being the National Institute of Standards and Technology, by the 31st of December 2030.
Now, here's where it gets really sobering. Before these executive orders, the general framing in the industry was that cryptographically relevant quantum computers, the ones actually powerful enough to break current encryption, were unlikely before 2035. So most organizations treated post-quantum migration as something to plan for, not act on urgently. That framing has just been shredded.
And the cost numbers are staggering. The U.S. Office of the National Cyber Director projected in 2024 that the total government-wide transition cost from 2025 to 2035 would be approximately $7.1 billion in 2024 values. The accelerated 2030 deadline will push that figure significantly higher because demand for PQC transition services, specialized tooling, and qualified cryptography engineers will spike.
For private organizations, estimates range from $100,000 to $500,000 for small businesses with fewer than 100 employees. Mid-sized enterprises can expect $1 million to $20 million. And for large organizations with more than 10,000 staff, $10 to $100 million. And these estimates were mostly scoped for the original 2035 window, so even they are likely to be revised upward.
One of the most important concepts mentioned in the article is the harvest now, decrypt later attack. Threat actors are stealing encrypted data right now, today, even though they can't currently decrypt it. They're banking on quantum computers being available within the next several years. By the time that happens, they'll have archives of stolen ciphertext just waiting to be unlocked. So the threat is not theoretical. It is already in play.
Jonathan Nguyen Dewey, the CTO of Arkit, a quantum security vendor, was quoted in the article. He said, "Cryptography sits everywhere, from applications, networks, cloud environments, and software libraries to connected devices and third-party systems. Post-quantum migration is much more than swapping one algorithm for another. Every update needs to be tested and implemented without disrupting the business. It requires long-term funding, cross-functional ownership, and a level of persistence that many organizations will find challenging."
Google has set itself a 2029 internal deadline to integrate PQC into its systems. Apple has been doing this work for years, so the big players are already moving.
The practical advice from experts is straightforward. Start with a cryptographic inventory of your IT and OT environments. Identify what encryption you're using, where it is, and how critical it is. Then prioritize remediation based on asset criticality, data sensitivity, and operational dependency. And if you need to make the case to your board, position it as a strategic risk, not a technology upgrade.
And for South African practitioners, while this is a U.S. federal requirement, it sets the tone globally. If you have any dealings with U.S. federal contractors, or if you simply want to stay ahead of the regulatory curve, this belongs on your risk register today, not in 2029.
Lynn, can I just say, if someone's not started this yet, they're behind.
You can say that, and you'd be right.
Right. Moving on to our second story. Also from the 26th of June, two bipartisan U.S. congressmen, Josh Gottheimer from New Jersey and John Moolenaar from Michigan, who chairs the House Select Committee on China, introduced legislation called the Cloud Security Act. And while that sounds like something you'd fall asleep to, trust me,
It is genuinely interesting.
So the context. The US has had export controls on advanced AI chips for some time. These are the high-performance semiconductors, think NVIDIA's H100 and similar, that are required to train the large AI models underpinning modern AI applications. The controls exist because you don't want adversary nations, particularly China, acquiring the compute infrastructure needed to build military AI or advanced surveillance systems.
The problem, and it's a rather elegant problem if you set aside the alarming implications, is that the export controls apply to the physical sale of chips. But what if you don't need to buy one? What if you can rent time on one through Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, or Google Cloud?
you rent compute time on cloud infrastructure that includes those restricted chips. You run your AI training workload. You never take ownership of any hardware. The existing controls have a massive blind spot because they weren't designed with this model in mind.
And this isn't speculation. The bill's sponsors note explicitly that adversaries don't need to own what they can rent. China, in particular, has the financial resources and technical sophistication to exploit exactly this kind of loophole.
So what does the Cloud Security Act actually do? Two things. First, it allows cloud compute providers to voluntarily report suspected misuse of their services, specifically by customers associated with US adversaries, to the Department of Commerce. Second, it essentially creates a framework for identity verification of cloud users, so providers know who is actually on the other end of the connection.
The word voluntarily matters here. Currently, cloud providers are generally prohibited by law from disclosing customer records or content to the government. So even if AWS suspects that a customer is training a military AI system for an adversarial state, they're in a significant legal gray zone if they want to flag it. This bill gives them the legal clarity and protection to do so.
Congressman Gottheimer put it bluntly, "We can't let our adversaries dodge our export controls by simply renting what they can't buy." And Chairman Moolenaar added that US cloud platforms have a role to play in stopping the AI buildup of adversaries who use that capability to fuel military and surveillance ambitions.
Now, why does this matter for South African practitioners and organizations? A few reasons. Firstly, the major cloud providers, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, are global. Their terms of service, their compliance obligations, and their reporting frameworks affect every customer, not just American ones. If this law passes and cloud providers are required to verify the identity of users and monitor for suspicious behavior, that affects the onboarding and compliance experience globally.
Secondly, and this is the longer-term view, legislation of this kind tends to set precedent. We've seen it with data protection, with cross-border data transfer restrictions, with sanctions screening. The U.S. moves and other jurisdictions follow, adapt, or respond. Expect similar discussions about cloud compute access controls to emerge in Europe and potentially in South Africa over the next 12 to 24 months.
And thirdly, from a pure risk management perspective, if your organization relies on cloud-based AI compute services, you should understand where that compute is physically hosted, who the legal entity you're contracting with is, and what their obligations are in your jurisdiction and theirs. This is basic supply chain risk management in an AI context.
In other words, know your cloud provider the way you'd want to know any critical third party properly.
Our third story this week is a research paper published on RxEve, the open access academic preprint repository, on the 24th of June. The paper is by Leah Roxanne Muth and Marion Margraf, and it was accepted for the 2026 IEE International Systems Conference in Halifax, Canada.
The title is Probabilistic Agents in Deterministic Audits, Evaluating Multi-Agent Systems for Automated Audits based on the German IT Grundschutz, which is about as German as a title gets.
Yeah, no, we're going to need a bit of unpacking there.
Let's start with the problem they're trying to solve. The EU's NIS2 directive, NIS standing for Network and Information Security, requires thousands of small and medium enterprises across Europe to implement robust information security risk management frameworks. The German standard they've chosen to test against is called the IT Grundschutz, published by Germany's Federal Office for Information Security, known as the BSI. IT Grundschutz is essentially Germany's highly structured equivalent of ISO 27001, thorough, rigorous, and notoriously labor-intensive to implement and certify.
The research question is simple. Can AI automate part of that process? Specifically, the researchers built a multi-agent system, or MAS, combined with something called Hybrid Retrieval Augmented Generation, or Hybrid RAG. The idea behind Hybrid RAG is that instead of letting an AI model rely purely on its training data, you give it access to a specific knowledge base, in this case the IT Grundschutz documentation, and it retrieves relevant content before generating its response. This reduces hallucination and improves accuracy.
Hallucination, for those who haven't heard the term, is when an AI model confidently outputs information that is simply incorrect. It's one of the core reliability challenges in using AI for high-stakes tasks like compliance auditing.
The researchers tested their system across 4 phases of an IT Grundschutz audit: structural analysis, protection needs assessment, modeling, and the IT Grundschutz check itself. And the results are instructive for anyone considering AI-assisted compliance work.
The good news, the AI performed very well on what the researchers call semantic tasks: structural analysis, understanding the topology of an organization's IT environment, identifying which systems connect to which, modeling, mapping assets and processes to the relevant controls. These are tasks that involve extracting and organizing information, and the AI genuinely reduced manual effort significantly.
The less good news, the AI struggled considerably on the logical reasoning phases, the protection needs assessment, where you determine how sensitive each asset is, and the IT Grundschutz check, where you evaluate whether specific controls have actually been implemented correctly. These phases require binary deterministic judgment, yes or no, pass or fail, and the researchers found that the probabilistic nature of current large language models, LLMs, makes that kind of judgment unreliable.
The paper's conclusion is thoughtful. They don't say AI can't do audits, they say AI can do the groundwork brilliantly, but for the judgment calls, for the determination of whether a control is satisfied, you need a human. The AI reduces the effort, it doesn't replace the expertise.
This has real resonance for ISO 27001 implementations and POPIA compliance work here in South Africa. The documentation burden, the asset mapping, the evidence gathering, these are exactly the tasks where AI tooling could reduce the workload on practitioners meaningfully. But the final compliance determination? Keep that with your qualified team.
And I think that's a healthy way to think about AI in this space generally. It's a powerful assistant. It's not a replacement assessor.
And there you have it. We hope you found today's episode interesting. If you did, please share it with your colleagues, your friends, your family. Word of mouth is a strong driver of podcast growth.
If you want to hear more of the same, subscribe on Apple, Samsung, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or YouTube.
And if you need security, risk, or ICT legislation advice, contact Priviso, consulting directly at admin@priviso.co.za.
If you have topics you'd like us to cover or questions about anything we discussed today, reach out to us. We love hearing from our listeners. Stay safe.